You remember the way silence spoke louder than words. The way a sigh lingered in the air when you walked into the room. The way your mother's shoulders stiffened, or your father's eyes glazed past you, as if your presence was an interruption. No one had to tell you directly. You felt it. The atmosphere told you the truth before language could. You were not the child they had dreamed of. You were not the one they wanted. Maybe you were born at the wrong time, into a marriage already cracking at the edges. Maybe you were the girl they hoped would be a boy. Maybe you were simply one child too many. It doesn't matter what the reason was. The wound is the same. You grew up carrying a message that was never spoken, yet always delivered. You are a burden. You are a mistake. You are not enough. For other children, love was obvious. It came in birthday parties, in laughter around the dinner table, in the easy warmth of a hug. For you, love was uncertain, conditional, fading in and out like bad reception on a radio. Sometimes you caught a glimpse of it, a smile, a pat on the head, but just as quickly, it slipped away. And so you started asking yourself questions no child should ever have to ask. Why am I here if nobody wanted me? What do I have to do to be worth keeping? If I disappear, would they even notice? This is the origin of the unwanted daughter, a girl who learned to survive not by being herself, but by hiding herself. Because when your very existence feels like an inconvenience, you learn to shrink, to adapt, to wear masks so heavy that one day you forget what your real face even looks like. But here's the haunting truth. That little girl didn't stop existing. She still lives inside you. And she still aches with the same question she whispered back then. If I wasn't wanted as a child, how do I learn to want myself as an adult? That is the journey we're stepping into now. And it begins with facing the wound you were never meant to carry. Your childhood was stitched together, not with love, but with absences. Birthdays blurred into ordinary days, celebrated with a flat voice, or forgotten entirely. Your school drawings sat on the fridge not as treasures, but as obligations. And when you cried, whether quietly into a pillow or loudly in the next room, no one came. It wasn't always cruelty. Sometimes it was indifference. Sometimes exhaustion. Sometimes a distracted parent lost in their own storms. But to you, the little girl who longed for arms to hold her, the message was the same. You are not worth the effort, so you learned to read the room like a secret code. You scanned your mother's face for signs of irritation. You counted the seconds between your father's words. You memorized every sigh, every slammed cupboard, every shift in tone. Because a home where love feels conditional becomes a battlefield and survival depends on prediction. This is the birthplace of hypervigilance, the state where your nervous system never relaxes. Always alert, always bracing for rejection. Other children could be carefree, but you became a watchtower, always on guard, and slowly, something even more heartbreaking began to happen. You blamed yourself. Because children do not naturally believe their parents are incapable of love. Instead, they believe, if they don't love me, it must be my fault. Psychologists call this parentification, when a child steps into roles they should never have to hold. But in your case, it wasn't just about doing chores or taking care of siblings. It was emotional. You became responsible for managing the feelings of adults who couldn't manage their own. You kept the peace. You softened your voice. You held back your needs. You've tried in ways to advance for your years, to make yourself more lovable. But here's the truth. No one told you back then. You were never unlovable. You were simply in a place where love was broken. And instead of questioning the brokenness of the system, you turned the blade inward and questioned yourself. This was the early wound, not just being unwanted, but believing it was your job to fix it. When love feels scarce, a child doesn't give up. A child adapts. And so, you built a survival roller mask to wear in the theater of your own family. Maybe you became the good girl, always polite, never raising your voice. Maybe you became the achiever, stacking grades, trophies, and gold stars like bricks to build yourself a place of belonging. Maybe you became the caretaker, soothing your parents' moods, raising your siblings, becoming far older than your years demanded. On the outside, adults applauded these roles. Teachers said, "She's so responsible," relatives marveled. She's so mature for her age. But what they praised was not the real you. It was the mask you wore, because underneath the truth ached. You weren't trying to be extraordinary. You were trying to be chosen. The survival role gave you a temporary shield. When you earned an A+, for a fleeting moment, you felt safe. When you stayed quiet during an argument, you avoided the storm. When you fixed other people's problems, you earned scraps of gratitude. But the cost of wearing this mask was enormous. The more you performed, the less you felt at home in your own skin. The more you adapted, the more invisible your real self became. This is what psychologists call conditional worth, the belief that you are only valuable when you perform, when you serve, when you sacrifice. And over time, that belief burrows into your identity until you cannot tell where the mask ends and where you begin. The irony is devastating. The very strategies that helped you survive childhood became the chains that bind you in adulthood. Because every role, good girl, achiever, caretaker, has one hidden cost: the burial of your authentic self. And here's the cruel paradox. The world outside your family often rewarded you for this. The workplace praised your work ethic. Friends admired your loyalty. Partners leaned on your strength. But every compliment, every clap, every smile felt like it was aimed at the mask, not at you. And deep down, you knew it. Because the one thing the unwanted daughter never learned was this: love is supposed to be given freely, not earned through performance. The mask that saved you as a child becomes the prison that traps you as an adult. You might find yourself working endlessly, chasing degrees, promotions, or praise because somewhere inside, the belief still lingers. If I achieve enough, maybe I'll finally be worthy. You might crumble at the slightest hint of rejection, because every unanswered text, every distant tone echoes the old wound. You are not wanted. You might stay in relationships that drain you, because you learn to accept crumbs of affection as if they were a feast. You might overfunction in your friendships, always the listener, never the one allowed to fall apart. You might sabotage your own happiness, because comfort feels foreign and pain feels familiar. You might look in the mirror and find it hard to see a person. You only see roles: worker, caretaker, pleaser. This is what psychologists call rejection sensitivity and hypervigilance carried into adulthood. Your nervous system, trained in the fires of childhood, still scans the room for danger, still interprets silence as abandonment, still braces for the love that will be pulled away. And so you live with an internal contradiction. You crave closeness, yet fear it. You want to be chosen, yet doubt you're worth choosing. You work twice as hard, yet believe you've never done enough. Even in moments of joy, you hear the whisper of the unwanted daughter: don't relax. It won't last. But here's the hardest truth. What you call flaws are not random. They are symptoms. They are the echoes of a wound you never deserved. They are survival responses dressed up as personality traits. And if no one ever told you this, let me say it clearly now. There is nothing inherently wrong with you. What feels broken in you is simply the long shadow of a childhood where you were forced to adapt in order to exist. The consequences are real, but they are not your fault. Here's the truth most people never dare to say out loud. Children would rather believe they are unworthy than believe their parents cannot love them. Because for a child, the idea that my parents are incapable of love is unbearable. It threatens survival. So instead, you took the blame. You told yourself, if I wasn't wanted, it must be because of me. If I wasn't loved, it must be because I'm not lovable. This is the cruel genius of the child's mind. It protects the bond with the parent at the cost of the bond with the self. You sacrificed your own authenticity just to keep attachment. Because no matter how unwanted you felt, belonging even in a fractured, conditional form was safer than being alone. So you learned to bend, to please, to disappear, to become whatever version of yourself seemed least inconvenient. And in that process, you abandoned the one person you couldn't afford to lose: yourself. Think about that. The unwanted daughter survives by exiling her own voice, her own needs, her own truth. You made yourself small, not because you were small, but because you believed shrinking might finally earn you a place at the table. The heartbreaking irony? It worked temporarily. You may have gained moments of approval, but they came at the cost of your inner home. And now, as an adult, you may feel a strange emptiness no achievement can fill. You may look at your life and think, why do I feel hollow even when I'm doing everything right? The answer lies here. You're still living by a contract you signed as a child, one that said, if I abandon myself, maybe they'll accept me. But here's the deeper truth. That contract was written in fear, not in reality. The truth is, you were never unwanted in essence. You were simply born into a story where love was limited, broken, or misdirected. And none of that was your fault. There comes a moment in every healing journey when the truth hits with both grief and clarity. No one is coming to rescue the child you buried. The footsteps you waited for in the hallway will never arrive. The arms you longed for will never open. The words you craved, I'm glad you're here. I'm proud you're mine, may never be spoken by the people you once begged them from. And yet, here's the paradox. While that truth can shatter you, it can also free you, because if no one else is coming, then maybe finally you realize it must be you. You are no longer the powerless child standing in the doorway of love that never opened. You are the adult now. And that gives you authority your younger self never had. You can stop waiting. You can stop bending. You can stop bargaining for scraps of affection that should have been given freely. This is the turning point, when the unwanted daughter becomes the woman who refuses to abandon herself any longer. When you say, if I wasn't wanted then, I will want myself now. It isn't about pretending the past didn't hurt. It did. It still does. It's about choosing to break the contract that was written in your childhood, the one that demanded. You trade your authenticity for attachment. No one can go back and rewrite the beginning of your story. But you can pick up the pen now. You can decide how the next chapters are written. The girl you once buried is still inside you. She is waiting to be seen not by them, but by you. And when you turn toward her, when you finally say, I'm not leaving you behind, something shifts. The tragedy begins to transform into agency. And the silence that once defined your life becomes the space where your own voice can finally rise. So how do you begin to heal the wound of being unwanted? It doesn't start with pretending the pain never existed. It begins with facing it gently, courageously, without apology. The first step is learning to recognize the voice of the buried child. That whisper inside you that says, don't ask for too much. That fear that flares when someone turns away. That instinct to overwork, overgive, overprove, those are not flaws. They are echoes. They are survival strategies that once kept you alive. But now as an adult, they no longer serve you. Healing means giving yourself what no one else gave you. This is the work of reparenting, learning to become the parent your younger self needed. It sounds abstract, but it's simple. You pause and ask, what did I need back then that I never received? Was it safety? Then today you give yourself boundaries. Was it comfort? Then you allow yourself rest, softness, care. Was it encouragement? Then you speak to yourself with words that uplift, not tear down. This is also the practice of shadow work, turning toward the parts of yourself you once hid in order to be accepted. The tears, the anger, the longing. Instead of exiling them, you welcome them home. And then there is inner child work. You imagine the little girl sitting on her bed, holding her loneliness like a secret. And you, as the adult, sit beside her now. You tell her what she never heard. You are not a burden. You are not too much. I am glad you're here. I want you. It won't undo the past. But every time you choose yourself, every time you offer care where neglect once lived, you rewrite the story. You prove to that child and to yourself that she was never unworthy. Only unloved by people, too limited to see her, and slowly, the unwanted daughter becomes the woman who belongs to herself. So here we are at the end of the story. The daughter who was never wanted? The girl who grew up reading sighs instead of lullabies? The young woman who wore masks so heavy she forgot the shape of her own face? And now you. The adult who is beginning to see that the wound was never proof of your unworthiness, but of your parents' limitations. You never got the childhood you deserved. You never heard the words you needed to hear. But that does not mean your life is doomed to the shadow of that absence, because here's the truth. The fact that you were unwanted then does not mean you are unworthy now. The fact that you were unseen then does not mean you were invisible forever. The fact that you were unloved then does not mean love is. It's impossible for you today. Healing is not about erasing the wound. It's about learning to carry it differently. You will still have moments when the old voice rises, when rejection feels unbearable, when the child inside you whispers, "I'm not enough." But now you have a new answer. You can turn inward and say, "I want me. I choose me. I belong here." You may have been born into a story of absence, but you are the author of the chapters still unwritten. And every time you show yourself compassion, every time you set a boundary, every time you refuse to abandon yourself, you prove that the unwanted daughter has grown into a woman who claims her place in the world. So let me leave you with this. You never had the childhood you needed, but you still have the future you deserve. If this resonated with you, take a moment to share your reflections in the comments below. Your story matters here. You matter here. And if you want more deep dives into the hidden psychology of childhood wounds, subscribe to this channel, because remember, your past may explain you, but it does not define you. You are no longer unwanted. You are yours.